Do you see in the future for China in Africa, the same scenario that the Paris Club saw in Africa, so that Africans will turn back and will not repay the debt? They will change their attitude to Chinese soft power. What's your impression? What's your idea about this?
Well, it is indeed true that the Chinese are using the loans as a soft power, and they build what the African countries want. Airports, for example, railway lines and motorways, as I have already mentioned. And basically, it is not really clear who is going to pay the price, as I have already mentioned. And in case of delayed payment, the Chinese are quite swift, and they try to offer an extended time frame for paying the money back. And it is not an exaggeration to say that to a certain extent China is trying to make some African countries dependent on China, and it is not really clear what is going to happen to the huge project when the African economies and when the African countries simply can't pay the money back. Many say that the airports and, for example, the infrastructure will be taken over by the Chinese. But let me tell you again, as the deals are not really available for the people, and the signed documents are for the governments only and for the ministers only, we cannot outline a vision for the future for these countries, and we cannot say that the African economies will be thrown into debt, or the assets of the African countries will be taken over by the Chinese. It is a possible scenario, but there are a couple of other visions for the future as well.
Of course, China is not doing it only for the goodwill of or to help, like, or friendship in the African countries. Of course, they need this infrastructure that they are building up and developing in Africa for their project of the new Silk Belt Road. But what I want to highlight is that Chinese are using this approach even quite soft in terms of power. We don't see any military power in Africa and so on. But the responsibility is also our as European, so from our point of view, being European, but also from American point of view. So Africans got quite fed up with Americans because they saw that they can't fully trust them. America lost the interest in Africa as well, and Europe lost the power in Africa. If you see even what's going on with the former colonies of France, no? What you can say about this?
Yeah, thank you for this very interesting question. Basically, immediately I have to point to three important issues. The first is that, from the part of China, there is a very big interest in keeping the Chinese economy growing. So that's why they are investing in other countries. That's why, they finance infrastructure projects in Asia, in other parts of Asia, in Africa, because they definitely need a certain level of economic development, because they want to prevent the rising unemployment in China. The other thing is that the U.S. as a country indeed became less interested in Africa. If you turn to an American and if you ask about Africa, they will simply say that, yes, those countries are dangerous. There are deadly diseases there. There is the ISIS, for example, and they are pointing to the terrorist groups, and they usually label the African countries, sorry for the expression, shithole countries and poor countries. when you turn to the citizens of the European Union, they will talk about poor Africa. They believe in the almighty work of the NGOs, for example. But the Chinese look upon Africa completely differently. They usually say that the African countries are our business partners. No matter how poor or how rich they are, we can do business with them. And they usually say that, well, based on the business connections, we can develop good diplomatic and political connections as well. And let me tell you that the other countries try to follow the Chinese example. The other countries, the European Union countries, for example, try to open new embassies, and they try to be there in Africa, and they try to tap, or let me use the expression or word, milk the growing African economies. But let me tell you that the Chinese way ahead of these countries. The other countries are just following the Chinese example, as I have already mentioned.
Yeah, I saw even Russia that changed their approach in Africa. No, I saw several military attaché that are having a lot of meetings with the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the Minister of Defense, and several army are coming here for retraining. So this is an interesting also approach, not only economical but even in terms of defensive. But to recall what you say before, the comment before, maybe as European we are not understanding the African scenario, as I would like to say, as we didn't understand 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the Chinese scenario. So we are still slow thinking or slow understanding where the future is going to. So according to my point of view, the future is African. Why? Because the Africa, having this demographic boom, will have also to create, will have needs. No, we are an economist, so everything is based on needs. So Africans will have needs, and needs means to create a new market, a huge market of billions of people. So my point of view is that as European, we are still slow in understanding where the future will be in 20 years, 30 years, as we did in the past, as we didn't understand that China was ready to grow that fast and to keep that growth, despite somebody telling that 6% or 80% is not enough, but it's quite physiological, no? It slowed down after 10 years or 15 years of plus 15 or plus 20 growth. My question, the following question, Pastor, is this. China is not only developing, using, let me say, the checkbook diplomacy, but is trying to invest even in high tech. What do you know about the parallel banking system in Africa?
All right, if you don't mind, first I go back to what you were telling about the future of Africa.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, I can confirm your words. And as an economist, I always remember what John Maynard Keynes told us. And according to Keynes, it is very, very difficult to get rid of the old ideas and the old models and, for example, the old formulas. And it is quite easy, to develop new ones and to outline something new. And, well, we Europeans are struggling from getting rid of the old ideas. And basically, we Europeans still believe that there is a huge poverty in Africa, and we still believe that these countries are not developing. But basically, there is a visible growth in these countries. And, well, in coming years and in coming decades, Africa's international position will completely change. Maybe for the better, maybe, there will be a very, very rapid change for the better. We will see. And as for your question related to finance, well, I can tell you that there will be a lot more people in Africa in the coming years. They need something to eat. They need something to drink. They need to travel, and they need to transfer money. And basically, currently, in the African countries, there are not so many commercial banks. There are not so many bank branches. But still, the people want to transfer money. And with clever innovations, the Africans have been developing, digital currencies. They are trying to find ways of transferring money to each other. And based on my research and based on my experience, it is pretty much clear that the African economies will not follow the transformation of the banking sector, what we had here in Europe. I'm pretty much sure that in the coming years, there will be no more bank branches. Instead, they are going to have more and more sophisticated digital currencies, for example, electronic bank accounts, and they are going to use digital, ways of transferring money. If you don't mind, I mention a good example. In East Africa, they use the so-called Epasa. M stands for money, Pesa stands for, M stands for mobile, Pesa stands for money. And basically, the Kenyans use their mobile phones and they transfer money to each other within seconds. And if we transfer a little amount of money, we don't have to pay for the service. The more we transfer, the larger our fees. But basically, in case of small amounts, the service is free, and many people use it. And imagine, even in the shops where there is an M-Pesa account of the shopkeeper, we don't have to have banknotes. We don't have to have coins. We simply use our phone. We simply type the code of that exact shop. We transfer, the exact amount of money what we have to pay. And in the return, we get, the bread, the necessary things we have selected. So, I'm pretty much sure that in the coming years and in the coming decades, there will be a different banking system in the African countries. I say this largely because, those countries will not have enough time, to develop a European-like banking system. They will simply skip some stages.
As far as I heard, also this Epasa is going to become a new credit system in Africa. And why Africa needs credit? Because I heard also that what they have in common with Chinese is the love for gaming. They are gaming and betting a lot through their mobile phones, like a copy, a replica of Chinese iPhone that costs $35, if I'm not mistaken, and they connect with the internet. They bet or they game, and many of them they are getting financially destroyed because they lose money. Did you see this situation in Africa?
Well, I can confirm what you told us, and I can say that the Africans need more money and they need more credit. Imagine in some African countries, the people are very business-minded. They are toying with the idea of opening their own shops. They are toying with the idea of having their own startup companies. They indeed have some innovative ideas, and they try to benefit from these innovative ideas. And let me tell you again that it will be crucial whether these people can get financed or whether they can get credit from the financial institutions. And you were also right by saying that in some countries the people are betting. In Africa, everyone has their favorite football team, and the Africans are not far from betting, and they may lose some money, and in some cases they may win some money, but mostly they use. When we are talking about credit and when we are